Hello DosBox Turbo users. We're going to take a look at how to configure your external USB or Bluetooth controller to play Doom. In this video, we're going to set up the mappings as a keyboard instead of an analog joystick. Look for my other video to set up the analog joystick. So let's go ahead and fire up DosBox Turbo. Bring up the keyboard. Actually, before we do that, that's okay. Let's bring up the keyboard. Let's go and set up Doom. cd DOS, cd Doom. Now we're in the Doom S directory. Let's run the setup. Now we need to configure Doom to use the external controller, and we're going to set up the external controller as a keyboard. We're going to map a bunch of keys to the external controller. Now by default, DosBox Turbo automatically maps the DPAD of the external controller. So let's go ahead and use that, and we will select controller type, hit enter on the keyboard, and let's make sure we're on keyboard only. Now let's go ahead and configure the controller keyboard. So now we need to map the space, control, and alt keys. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, let's go into the settings menu. Let's go to button controller maps. Now you can see the D-pad has already been pre-configured. Let's add a button mapping, and let's map the one button here. Let's map that to control. We'll add another button mapping. We'll map the 2 button. Let's map that to alt. And let's add one more button mapping. And we'll map that one to control. Oops, we already had control. Let's map that one to space. So we're done here. Let's exit out. And let's go ahead and save and launch Doom. So now that we have our controller mappings mapped, we can use the D-pad to control the character. Hello DosBox Turbo users. Today I'm going to show you how to get Doom working with an external USB or Bluetooth controller. So let's jump right in. Let's fire up DosBox Turbo. Now, what we want to do first is I have my Logitech USB controller hooked up here, and I want to configure a couple of controls. Now, DosBox Turbo by default will map the left stick of your external gamepad to the D-pad, and it'll map the right stick to the analog joystick. Most DOS games are played with keyboard, or can be played with keyboard. Some games can also be played with the analog joystick, and for other games it's optional. But we're going to take a look at Doom, and we're going to set it up for the analog joystick. So let's go into the settings first, and let's take a look at the button and controller maps. Now you can see our default settings are set up for the D-pad. Let's add a setting. Let's map some of the buttons. So we're going to map button 1, and let's map that to the joystick A button, the DOS joystick A button. Okay. Now let's map button 2. Let's map that to the joystick B button. And let's add another map. We'll map the button 3 to the Enter key. All right. So now let's exit out. Let's go into our DOS directory. Now, before I fire up Doom, I want to show you a program called JoyTest. Sorry, it's JoyCheck. And with this program, you can confirm that your analog joystick is working. So if I move this around, you can see that the analog joystick is indeed working, and the buttons, the analog joystick buttons are working as well. So let's get out of there. We have to press escape. It's mapped to the back button. Bring up our keyboard. We're gonna go into the Doom directory. Now, before we start Doom, we want to run the setup. Most DOS games have a setup utility like this that will allow you to configure the controller. So I'm going to select the controller type. Remember I had button 3 mapped to the Enter key? This is why. Makes it easier. Now, I'm going to choose keyboard plus joystick. And I will go ahead and configure the controller. Let's just make sure everything's set up correctly. I think it already is. Fire is button 1 and strafe is button 2. We don't have a button 3 and 4. And that's fine. So let's go ahead and save the parameters and launch Doom. Now, it wants me to center the joystick and press button 1, so I'll go ahead and do that. Push the joystick to the upper left corner and press button 1. Push the joystick to the lower right corner and press button 1. Here we go. And you can see it's working.